Hey, what's up, guys, and welcome to Talk4 X, a fast-paced current news reporting wing of the Talk4 podcast, where I, Louis Scupian, give great interviews and interview unique and interesting people on current situations and news. So let's get up to speed. We've got something spicy from today. So, RAF Typhoon Jets intercepted Russian bombers flying north of Scotland in the early hours of Monday morning. Today, UK government has said Typhoon fighters were scrambled to intercept two Russian long-range maritime patrol bombers as they transited near the Shetland Islands within NATO's northern air policing area. The government added, right, so basically, in other words, we've got bad guys a little too close for comfort. To discuss this today and give us some insight into the rules of engagement, airspace, and where and when things could get a little bit messy, I've brought on my 50th guest of the Talk4 podcast and a good friend, Matthew, call sign Whiz, Buckley. Whiz is a Top Gun graduate of the Red or Adversary course, and he's just an absolute expert on fighter jets and all things kind of NATO airspace and rules of engagement, just an absolute expert. And yeah, the last time I saw this guy was outside the FLA arena after watching some pretty wicked ice hockey and flying around in his fighter jet. Yeah, it's as crazy as it sounds. But before we dig into the story, Whiz, how's everything going, brother? How's life been since we last spoke?
Everything's great, man. Foundation's going good. Our mission at the No Fallen Heroes Foundation to save and change the lives of veterans, first responders, and their families. So that's doing really good. Can't complain, man.
Glad to hear it, man. You're looking healthy, looking very well. But right, so let's dig into the story. So kicking it off then, first of all, would you say that this is an escalation by Russia, as these events seem to be happening more often now? Are they just probing our defenses, or is this something we should kind of be a bit worried about? Obviously, these are, bombers capable of carrying nuclear weapons.
Yeah, it's ops normal, man. I mean, this has been going on since I was a kid. I grew up outside of Atlantic City, New Jersey. And the guy across the street from me, I was best friends with his son, but the guy across the street from me was an Air National Guard pilot, and he flew F-106s for the New Jersey Air National Guard out of Atlantic City. And those guys were responsible for air defense from about like Rhode Island down to the Carolinas. Mm-hmm. And, a couple times a week, Bear bombers operating out of Cuba would take off, and they just kind of fly up the East Coast of the United States, and they just kind of hit their stopwatch as they drift into our airspace and just kind of test the reaction time as we would scramble our fighters to go up and intercept them. So, this is nothing new. We have this happening over Alaska often. The Russian bombers kind of come into our airspace or not into the airspace, or at least close. And it's just kind of a game of cat and mouse. So I wouldn't say it's an escalation. Mm-hmm. It's kind of ops normal. It's fun for the Typhoon guys or the Raptor or, anybody who's getting to go do the intercepts. It's fun. You get scrambled and, supersonic, and you're carrying live weapons and stuff like that. I mean, you never know if that's the day you're going to be called on. But to be honest with you, bro, we know when the pilots flying those aircraft wake up in the morning to go into the squadron. I mean, this isn't, them being scrambled is like the end of the chain of intelligence, right? We know when that thing took off, what they're heading at. We know everything, right? And not divulging too many national secrets, we probably know the loadout on that aircraft. We probably have it, people or images or electronic intelligence. Them being scrambled is, like I said, is at the bottom of the chain. We kind of, it's all for show a little bit. We're not going to let them enter our airspace and not respond, right? Mm-hmm. Obviously, but it's, I'd say this is ops normal.
Okay, man. Well, that's definitely comforting. But like you said, you never know when it might just be the day. So walk me through
Correct.
the rules of engagements in situations like this then. So when does it become a bigger problem and require stepping up? And how far would they need to push it for us to consider, well, as you like to eloquently put it, turn them into hair, teeth, and eyeballs?
Yeah, exactly. Well, I'm an old man, so not up to date on the most current rules of engagement, but kind of being a thinking man and using my brain, the only time they'd engage is if they enter our airspace. They don't respond to calls to leave the airspace, and they have to do a hostile act, right? The rules of engagement are kind of a flow chart, right? You can't just join up on a guy and smoke him. that's kind of what the Soviets used to do, right? They join up on a KAL jet and blow them out of the sky thinking they were an Air Force jet. So there's a very well thought out set of rules of engagement that they have to hit certain wickets for you to be able to squeeze the trigger. The last wicket they'd have to go through is a hostile act, right? I mean, if you're escorting a bomber and all of a sudden the guy's bomb bay doors open and they start dropping shit, that's obviously a hostile act. But in this type of environment, weapons are probably, that we have different weapon status. I'm not sure what the UK calls it, but red and tight, red and free, cold, all sorts of like different weapon status. And I guarantee you, before those guys or gals taxied out and scrambled, they knew what their weapon status was or the rules of engagement. But literally, whether you want to believe it or not, we're in a shooting war with Russia right now. For all intents and purposes, Ukraine's in NATO at this point. We're funding the war. We're giving them equipment. We're just, the only thing that we're not doing are boots on the ground, which there are boots on the ground, but that's a different conversation. So, but when you're in a shooting war, even though it's a proxy war with these guys, you gotta, you always got to be a little bit on edge, and there's no slacking off, because like we said, that could be the day. You never know. If all it takes is one of those bombers carrying a ton of weapons to be able to make it a bad day.
Yeah, absolutely true. And like you mentioned, so if we kind of theorize a bit then, so if these guys were to stray into our or NATO's airspace, what happens if our pilots get a missile lock on them as like a stage 2 past the interception? Because I would assume that's probably like the most obvious way of kind of giving a warning shot from a fighter jet.
Yeah, that aircraft has a ton of sensors all over it, just like a radar detector in your car, right? As soon as you get locked up by radar, there's a ton of stuff that's going to go off. So you could lock the jet up. These are if they're bear bombers or propeller planes, obviously, but they have backfire bombers as well. But if you lock them up, they know they're locked up, and they also know what they're locked up by, right? And what type of radar, and also if it's like, no kidding, I'm about to shoot radar. Worst case scenario, if they're not deviating their course, you'd fly in front of them, pop out a couple flares right in front of them to get their attention. Maybe they're all passed out or something like that, like Payne Stewart, and, the plane depressurized and they're just unconscious. So, you could lock them up, you could drop some flares, and then, somewhere down on the flow chart, if they ain't deviating their course, you'll fire a couple rounds across their nose from the gun. But again, if they stray in and, you lock them up. Well, and first of all, they're supposed to be on the, 121.5, which is the international distress frequency. So you'd hail them and say, hey, Russian bomber, get out of our airspace. So you try and hail them, you'd lock them up. You could drop some flares in front of them. You can fire some bullets. And then obviously at the end of the day, if the National Command Authority in Great Britain said, hey, smoke these guys, then they'd smoke them.
Right, I see. And this leads on to the last question quite well. It's completely about this then. So, what actually is like the pros and cons? What happens if they refuse to leave our airspace, but they do not lock their weapons onto our fighters? And if our fighters are running out of fuel, for example, do we just send more fighters, or do we allow them to do what they like as long as they're just completely non-aggressive? I mean, are there any kind of like rules that are slightly unwritten, which we as the general public just don't understand?
Well, a couple things. So I actually read the story this morning that we're talking about, and I forget the name of your tankers. You guys actually scrambled a tanker too. So they can do in-flight refueling. So they can, because those bear bombers can fly, I don't know, 8, 10, 12. I mean, they can stay airborne for a while. They can even shut down a couple motors and, run on 2 of them or something like that to save gas. But I know you all scrambled some tankers so the thirsty fighters can go hit the tanker. And if it's going to be a while, they'll scramble more fighters. I know your alert posture around your country definitely has other folks on alert that can scramble as well. And I think we even have some Eagles over there too, and Lake and Heath or whatever it's called. So gas wouldn't be a problem.
Okay. Cool.
But it's interesting because it just depends on the climate, right? Shameless plug. You ready for this? For my book, From Sea Level to Sea Level. I was in the Persian Gulf one day. I was supposed to go into over Iraq, but my transponder wasn't working too well, so I couldn't go. We call it the box. You couldn't go into the box because the transponder wasn't working, because I didn't want to get shot down by friendlies. So I'm hanging out overhead the ship, waiting for that group to come back out of Iraq so we could all land. And man, a contact got airborne out of Bushehr, which is in Iran, and it's a joint military and civilian airfield. And this contact's heading right for the USS Abraham Lincoln. And they said, hey, man, go intercept this guy. I'm like, oh, boy. I thought this was going to be a boring flight, just waiting for everybody to come home so we could all land together. I'm like, uh-oh. So, kind of woke up and started paying attention. So I started hauling ass towards this contact, and it's low and it's slow. I lock it up on the radar. It's doing, 85 knots or something like that. And I'm hauling ass. I'm like the dog on the kitchen floor trying to slow down. I did like a bunch of turns around him, with idle, speed brake out, and pulling G's trying to slow down. Got slow enough. I actually had to put my flaps down to get so slow. And I flew right past this Iranian helicopter. Single dude, just a single pilot sitting there, big helicopter and a big crate in the back, like just big piece of cargo and big Iranian flag. And I went past this dude and he just kind of looked at me and, just kept flying. And he was flying straight towards the aircraft carrier. He's about 10 miles away. And I'm like, oh boy. So I tell the boat, I said, hey man, single pilot, Iranian helo coming right for the ship, big crate in the back. And they told me the words you never want to hear in this situation: stand by. And stand by is military for we don't know what to do. Yeah. So I drift back behind this guy by about a mile or 2 miles, and I lock him up with a heat-seeking missile, a Sidewinder. And now we're at about 5 miles from the boat. Now I'm running through everything in my mind. I'm like, he's going to fly right on top of the boat. That's a small nuke or something like that. He's going to detonate it or fly it into the ship. It's going to sink, and I'm going to be responsible for the sinking of a carrier or killing 5,000, Marines and sailors on that ship. This is all running through my head. So I got him locked up, man. And, I put the master arm to arm, and he's one finger move away from being turned into hair, teeth, and eyeballs. And the boat comes up and says, okay, escort. And I'm like, seriously? So that just means hang with the dude. And I'm like, oh my God, man. So I just kind of back up even further. Now he's flying right over the aircraft carrier. And I remember kind of turning my head. I'm like, oh my God, is there going to be a flash, an explosion? And he keeps going. I'm like, what the? And he keeps going another 10 miles and he lands on an oil platform. So I was like, oh my God, man. And I did everything. I went up the radio freak, said, hey, man, deviate your course. You're flying right to a U.S. warship. We're conducting flight operation. Nothing. I, put some flares out. I put some stuff. I did everything. And, when I landed, my commanding officer was like, if you had smoked that guy, technically, you kind of would have been right, but that would have been it for you. You would have destroyed your career and everything like that. So I tell you that long, boring story because at the end of the day, it ultimately is the pilot and command's decision up there, right? Or obviously the National Command Authority. If they came up and said, "Hey, Whiz, smoke him," I would have shot him down. Same thing in the UK. If this guy's not deviating and the bomber's still coming into our country, obviously it would go up to the Prime Minister or the Secretary of Defense or whoever it is to make that call. But at the end of the day, man, in these single seat fighter jets, it comes down to the lady or the dude in the cockpit.
That's a really great way of describing it, man. I really appreciate that. And you've got some great stories. I mean, you pull that trigger and that could also just be like a political just storm from that as well. So it's a massive decision to make. And I think you've got some other really cool stories like that too, about like the time when you had a nice brand spanking new F-18 and and mistakes were made. But yeah, dude, just promote all of your stuff. Promote foundation, social media, podcast, where we can find this stuff and some more epic stories.
Yeah, you bet. You can follow me, official_Whiz Buckley. And then our foundation is the No Fallen Heroes Foundation, and it's at No Fallen Heroes on Instagram. But yeah, it was interesting because when I landed, my skipper's like, yeah, you probably could have smoked him, but you would have probably could have started it. That would have been an international incident, and hell, and that would have been the straw that broke Iran's back, and then they come and attack the boat. I'm like, holy crap. And I was what was I, 27? I think I was 27 years old, man. 27, 28-year-old kid, 26 maybe, in your mid 20s with those type of decisions. So it was pretty interesting. But yeah, man, I with these intercepts and everything like that, I think a couple days ago, one of your boats too, there was like a Russian warship or something like that. One of your frigates had to go intercept. So the temperature is definitely ratcheting up, man, and it's not getting better. In war and combat and stuff like that, we say it's going to get worse before it gets worse. And unfortunately, I think things are going to get worse. So if you need me back to talk more about this, hopefully you don't. But I'm here, man, whenever you need it.
Nah, you're the best, dude. And yeah, I mean, hopefully have you back on in future for some slightly lighter subjects, perhaps. But if you guys really enjoyed Whiz, then there's more of him on episode 50, and obviously some really good content from flying in his jet. But yeah, Whiz, absolute pleasure seeing you again, man. And thanks for your time, brother.
You bet, bro. Fight's on.
Fights on indeed. And thanks, guys, for listening. Like I said, feel free to check out the full-length podcast. It's in the description, episode 50. And yeah, make sure to subscribe for all my interesting talks with epic people. Signing off for now, and it'd be rude not to say it. Fights on. See you guys next time.